The year was 1994. The Balkans were torn apart by a brutal civil war that had been raging for years. NATO forces had established a no-fly zone over Bosnia-Herzegovina, enforcing it with the most advanced fighter jets in the world. But on February 28th, 6 pilots from the Bosnian Serb Air Force decided to challenge this aerial dominance in what would become one of the most lopsided air battles in modern history. The Banja Luka Incident, as it came to be known, pitted 6 outdated Jastreb light attack aircraft against the technological might of American F-16 Fighting Falcons. It was David versus Goliath in the skies, except in this case, Goliath won decisively. Let's set the scene. The Jastrebs were Yugoslav-made single-engine aircraft developed in the 1960s. By the 1990s, they were hopelessly outdated, subsonic, with limited range and payload capacity. The F-16s, by contrast, were the pinnacle of American air power, supersonic interceptors equipped with advanced radar systems, beyond visual range missiles, and cutting-edge avionics. The technological gap between these aircraft was roughly equivalent to pitting a World War II fighter against a modern jet. The 6 Bosnian Serb pilots knew this. They weren't fools. They were experienced aviators who understood the risks they were taking. But they also had a mission: to bomb an ammunition factory in Novi Travnik, deep in Bosnian government territory. This factory was producing weapons that were being used against their forces, and they believed that destroying it could help turn the tide of the war. Their plan was simple but daring. They would fly low, below NATO radar coverage, strike the factory, and return to base before the F-16s could intercept them. It was a desperate gamble, but one they felt compelled to take. The pilots took off from Mahavoljani Air Base near Banja Luka in the early morning hours. The weather was clear, which was both a blessing and a curse. Good visibility would help them navigate to their target, but it also meant they would be more easily spotted by NATO forces. They flew in 2 groups of 3, maintaining radio silence and hugging the terrain to avoid detection. For a while, it seemed like their gamble might pay off. They reached their target and successfully bombed the ammunition factory. But as they turned to head back to base, their luck ran out. NATO OAC surveillance aircraft had detected them, and 2 pairs of F-16s were scrambled from Aviano Air Base in Italy to intercept. The F-16s, call signs Night and Black, quickly closed in on the slower Jastrebs. The NATO pilots made radio contact, ordering the Bosnian Serb aircraft to land immediately or face the consequences. But the Jastreb pilots had no intention of surrendering. They knew that landing would mean capture and likely imprisonment. So they did the only thing they could: they ran. What followed was not so much a dogfight as a one-sided hunt. The F-16s, flying at more than twice the speed of the Jastrebs, easily caught up with the fleeing aircraft. The NATO pilots issued final warnings, but when these were ignored, they were cleared to engage. The first Jastreb was hit by an AIM-9 Sidewinder missile, fired by Captain Robert Wilbur Wright. The aircraft exploded in midair, with no sign of the pilot ejecting. The second was shot down moments later by Captain Scott Zulu O'Grady, who would later gain fame after being shot down himself over Bosnia and surviving for 6 days before being rescued. The remaining Jastrebs scattered, desperately trying to escape. One pilot, seeing the hopelessness of his situation, attempted to surrender by lowering his landing gear, the aerial equivalent of raising a white flag. But in the confusion of battle, his aircraft was still perceived as a threat and was shot down by a 3rd F-16. Another Jastreb crashed while attempting evasive maneuvers at low altitude, likely the result of pilot error induced by the stress of being hunted. By the time the brief engagement was over, 4 of the 6 Jastrebs had been destroyed. Only 2 managed to escape, limping back to base with battle damage. The human cost was high. 3 Bosnian Serb pilots lost their lives. The survivors would later report that they had never expected to encounter such overwhelming force. They had gambled on NATO's reluctance to engage directly in the conflict, a gamble that proved fatally wrong. For NATO, the Banja Luka incident marked a significant escalation in their involvement in the Bosnian War. It was the first time that NATO forces had engaged in combat operations since the alliance's formation in 1949. The ease with which the F-16s dispatched their opponents demonstrated the overwhelming technological superiority of Western air power, a fact that would not be lost on military observers worldwide. But beyond the geopolitical implications, the Banja Luka incident is a deeply human story. It's about 6 men who knew they were outmatched but flew anyway. It's about duty, courage, and the terrible calculus of war that sometimes demands sacrifices with little hope of success. The names of the Bosnian Serb pilots are not widely remembered today. They were not flying for a cause that history has judged kindly. The Bosnian War was marked